So after we get through the what happened, the infrastructure and people affected. Numbers, certainly. What kind of assistance is needed? What kind of type? Who has the capability to meet the needs? I had a stint at SAP where I was Vice President of Homeland Security and Defense. And what I tried to get us to do, more than anything else, is say, what are the bad outcomes that can occur from any, and I'll say that, any disaster, man-made or natural? They're all the same. There's going to be damage, destruction, pollution. There's going to be violence. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be, hunger. There's going to be thirst. There's going to be lines of communication. And so you can put every one of those down on one side. What I wanted to do, and what I think we still could do, is put on the other side all of the potential responders, all of the potential assets that occur by region, by nation, by international, and again, who has the authority to allocate those resources. And when it happened, then you provide inputs automatically back from the first responders, and then you begin to pull down, send that to the, if you will, the emergency management agency organization, be that the state, be that the federal, and say, here are the outcomes, here are the capabilities, because I know how many hospital beds are already there. I know how many ambulances are there. I know, a great example, with my old friend, the Raging Cajun, Russ Honore, down in Katrina. People were dying of thirst. 250 miles away, there were dozens of ROPUs, reverse osmosis water purification units, that were never called up, that could in fact make potable drinking water out of sewage. Thousands of gallons per hour. Didn't know because we didn't have the capability to understand where they were. Ultimately pulled together, but if you had, and I would suggest to anybody in this business, you need to have something like that that will give you a cookbook to success, a cookbook to respond to such as incidents like these. So, are they local available? Are they internationally available to mitigate the outcomes that you just talked about? And then, what are the assistance response timelines? How long is it going to take for somebody to get there? How long does it take to find and move the people, the machines, the food, the tarps to get there? That's got to be part of the plan. Next slide. So, who has the authority? Where are we? It depends on where. You start with that. Where am I? If I am in Liberia, despite what we may think, that the military, I was interested when you said military. Did you mean our military? Did you mean their military? And I know. But too often, in states that are not U.S., I think the military, U.S. military, believes that since they were asked to come, they're going to have the right of passage. Not always the case. So you really have to involve the local, and that means really local. That can mean precinct, that can be province, that can be state, and then beyond that, it could be things like NATO. It can be international. As you look forward, and is there a clear chain of command? Who's in charge all the time? If you don't know, you'll never get an answer. And sometimes it's hard to find who's in control, because many people claim control, and when that happens, or if you are mandated, as they are currently in Iraq, you have different sects in charge of different organizations in the same government. Now, how effective do you think our administration would be if the president was a Republican, the vice president was a Democrat, every one of the different secretaries were of different parties, or certainly not of the same party, and then you wonder how long it takes people to get things done? I'd suggest you don't know about chain of command. If you don't have a single chain of command with a single chain of command leader, I won't say commander, that can give you the vision, focus of where you want to go and get it done, it ain't going to happen. And that's why you really have to define those two very quickly. And then what coordination process exists today so that you can bring all of those organizations in. In Popayan, I got there and it was like a goat rope. Anybody ever hear of a goat rope? Have you ever seen one? Well, it's an interesting element. You have about 40 guys with ropes trying to rope this one goat. It doesn't happen very frequently. The goat makes a goat out of you. That's what, when you have everybody in charge and nobody in charge, you're never going to get there and get it done. In Popayan, we had the Cruz Roja, the Red Cross. We had the Muslim equivalent, which had sent people in. We had, obviously, USAID. We had the Department of State. I was representing at that time. You had the Colombian Army, the Colombian Police. You had both from a provincial as well as from the national armed forces, and they were in different command centers throughout and around the city. You think much got done? I got there on day 2. They had never even talked to each other yet. Everybody was trying to bring in stuff, competing for the same resources like we talked about, the warehouses, the platforms down at the airport, etc. There's nothing you could do. I went to a friend of mine who was a brigade commander in that region, and I said to the Colombian Armed Forces commander, I said, we've got to have a meeting to get all of these people together. Do you even know where they are? They made a list. It took them a day and a half just to make the list of all of the agencies that were available. And then when they made the list, they went out and gave a list to each one, or an invitation to the first event. We then had 2 a day, one at 7 in the morning and one at 7 at night. Say, where are we? What are the biggest? And we had teams that would go out and assess where's the biggest areas of damage. And then we had another team assessing what are all of the assets that we have on the ground today and what can we do. And we collaboratively agreed that we would have a committee set up where we're going to prioritize what goes where. After 3 days, we had it working, and it was, from that point forward, it's still a disaster, but it's one that you could grasp. It's the same thing in any organization, in any element that you have. You still have to go through and make sure that happens. Finally, what roles and responsibilities have been assigned to those leading organizations? Next slide. What capabilities on the ground? We already talked about it. We can talk through the ports of entry, the capacity, the flow through, if you will, the throughput, the metric tons that we just discussed. And logisticians do that, absolutely. But you still have to coordinate that and assign leadership roles as to who really owns, who is the policy maker, who is the director of that effort. Next slide. And then you attack like we talked about in importance. All the while, KISS. Everybody here know what KISS is? Keep it simple, stupid. The old, who knows about Napoleon's corporal? Does anybody know Napoleon's corporal? A lot of you do, but a lot of you don't. Napoleon, when he was giving his orders, would write them all out. And he had a corporal who was barely literate. And he would take his order and he would give it to the corporal. If the corporal could read it and respond back to him and say, here's what it means, correctly, then Napoleon would send the order out to his generals. If he couldn't, it didn't go. It would be rewritten by his staff, and he would give it back to the Napoleon's corporal. You better have a Napoleon's corporal on your staff, because when you're flying in a crisis, I can tell you that you're going to get it going in a hurry, and it's going to turn out to be a crisis. Remain triage, absolutely essential. Again, is it medical? Is it power? Is it infrastructure? Is it green or blue tarps? Is it medicine? In outbreaks of certain, like cholera and other things, it's absolutely medicine. You've got to know what that is. Focus on providing these assistance. I mean, coordination is great. It makes everybody feel good. Being on the site, oh man, yeah, let's talk about, well, that's my job. You get out of my stuff. That's hood, right? Actually, it's bullshit. It's because every time that you have a decision that is delayed because somebody wants to show their bravado and they're in charge, you have just potentially killed people, and you certainly have degraded the situation in which you find yourself. And then you can talk about assigning specialists to navigate, all of the intricacies. Absolutely, you need to do that. But the real thing, besides KISS, speed, speed, speed. Every moment you lose, lives can be lost. I've seen it, I've experienced it, and it's an ugly picture. Next slide is it. I look forward to your questions.